Hello, intrepid followers, subscribers, and watchers of my YouTube videos. Welcome back to Cosplay in the Geekfort. I am here today with Billy the Bick from Sionnach Studios. Hey, Billy.
That's me. Hello, Joel.
How are you today?
Good, good.
Cool. All right, so let's just jump into the questions. So I know how I met you and all about what's going on with you, but let's let the viewers know. So when did you start cosplaying?
So I have 3 different dates. So the first one is the very first time I ever wore a costume to a convention was when I was 13.
Oh, wow.
But then I didn't really do anything since then until I think it was like 8 years ago. For Emerald City was the first time I was like, hey, lots of people wear costumes now. We actually have this in common. I used to go to San Diego Comic-Con all the time because I lived down there. So I went for years and years. And it was started getting more and more popular. I was like, wow, this is cool. And then I moved up here, went to Emerald City the first year I moved up here. And I was like, oh, wow, it went from a minority thing of people doing it to most people do it. I was like, next year I'm going to wear a costume. So I that was 8 years ago. And then 4 years ago is when I started really getting into it and making things and doing it professionally, making stuff for other people and everything. So
Cool.
Now we're here.
So then that first costume you wore when you were 13, then was it a Star Trek costume?
It was my Riker costume. And that was,
nice.
it was season 1. So it was just the one piece polyester jumpsuit, which I still have. I wore it recently because, so it's a really long story. I'm not going to go into it, but so I lost it at one point, and then a friend of mine ended up with it. And I didn't even know, I thought it was gone. And she had a fire at her house. And one of the few things that survived magically, because it had just happened to be in her back closet, and a few things from that back closet survived. And one of them was my Star Trek costume.
Wow. Crazy.
And so she was like, hey, I have this. Do you want it? And I was like, yeah. So she sent it to me, and it fits still. It's a little tight in certain areas, but it still fits.
Nice. So then as an adult, as you said about 4 years ago, you started going to conventions up here. What was your first cosplay you did up here?
So my first costume that I had planned to do was I was going to do Spike from Cowboy Bebop, because that's my favorite anime series of all time. And so and it was an easy one, right? I was like, I'm just going to that was when I was before I was going to make anything. So I was like, I'll just buy clothes that's the right color and wear it, and put some green stuff in my hair, call it good. And so the year that I was going to do that was 8 years ago. And my son ended up being born 3 weeks late, and was born on Emerald City Comic-Con weekend that year. So I didn't get to go. And so I was like, okay, well, next year I'll do Spike, and I'll bring him with me and make him an Ein costume. And so I had Spike, and then we actually bought / made an Ein costume, but we made it so that it could start as an Ewok costume and then convert to Ein. So the first costume I actually did was Luke, and he was a baby Ewok, and we went to Emerald City together. So the first time I cosplayed really was with my son, who was, I think he was just almost about to turn 1, because the way that it doesn't always land. But yeah, so he was a baby Ewok, and that was actually what made me really realize how much people like cosplay, because nobody cared about my cosplay, of course, but I had a baby Ewok, right? And so I had no idea. I got off, I took the light rail downtown, and I get out, and I'm carrying him, and I literally got 1 block up the street towards the convention center, and people started asking me if they could take pictures. And I was like, take pictures of what? They're like, oh my God, cute baby Ewok. And I'm like, okay, cute baby Ewok, take a picture. And it took us 45 minutes to get to the convention center, because people kept stopping and asking to take pictures of him, clearly. But I was like, oh my God, people love this stuff. I thought it was weird for me to like this stuff, but, and it didn't matter if they were plainclothes people going to the convention or people in costumes. Everybody was like, oh my God, look at the cute baby Ewok. I was like, this is cool.
That's awesome. So I know the first cosplay I saw you in was Spirit Away? Is that
Princess Mononoke?
Princess Mononoke.
Yeah.
And that was at Renton City Comic-Con.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how many years after that first cosplay with your son was that one? Was
That was
3 years?
that was 3 years, because that was the same day, I switched costumes, right?
Yes, you did. That's right.
Yeah. So like, and nobody knew, like a lot of people didn't know it was me because the Ashitaka has the mask, and I was wearing something else earlier. She was like, "Where'd this guy come from?" But yeah, so that was 3 years later, and that's actually the same time that when I started like actually making stuff and like moved into doing it more professionally. But because Ashitaka is the first costume that I was like, I'm gonna make this costume instead of like store bought in like little pieces. And so everything head to toe on that costume I made from scratch, like the shoes, the weapons, like everything. And like, it was all trying everything for the first time. I was like, I've never sewn anything. I'm going to make a whole costume. I've never cast and mold and cast anything. I'm going to mold and cast some parts. It was the first thing I 3D like modeled and printed was part of the sword. And like, I was just like, I went crazy. I was like, I'm going to try every single thing I can in this one build.
I knew the bow because I asked you about it. That was the thing I remember asking you. That's how we started a conversation, was I was asking you about the bow, and you're like, oh, good. We talked for like a good 20 minutes before the cosplay contest had started. So yeah. Cool.
And then my other costume was Keith, which the Keith costume is actually the thing that made me when I was like, oh, I could actually like make stuff for other people, because that costume, I had made that one right after Ashitaka. And so like, those were kind of the two that I had in rotation at the time. But like, I wore that, I made Keith to wear to San Diego Comic-Con that year because it was the year Voltron started.
Yeah.
And I knew I was going to get to interview the creators of the show. And so I was like, I'm going to wear this to go interview them. I'm like, they're going to think I'm weird. Although not to jump ahead too far, but that turned into like my thing, is like I would interview people in costume and like they love it. I know people say it's like, oh, that's not professional, but when people are used to being interviewed by like press constantly, going in there as a press person wearing a costume from the thing that they're from, they love it. But yeah, so I did the Keith, and people were like, oh, your Bayard's really cool. Like, can you make me one? And I was like, yeah, I don't see why not. And that was like the first thing I started selling. And then, now we're here.
Cool. Speaking of like the interviews and talking to celebrities, you made was it a coffee can? Is that what that is?
Oh yeah, the Preacher can, the coffee can from the Preacher show.
Okay.
It's like, yeah, it's a coffee can, but in the show, it's actually, it like contains Genesis, which is like, it's a really long thing, but it's basically, there's like this powerful spirit that's inside the can that gets out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And so did you actually present it to one of the people from the show, or was it you just showed it to him? I can't remember.
Well, so again, this is San Diego Comic-Con, right? So I knew, just so people understand what we're talking about with the interview. So one of the things that I do kind of on the side is I work for geekdad.com, and I get to go like most of the time until I started doing this professionally, I was going to cons as press, not as like a professional or whatever. And so San Diego Comic-Con, like they have press rooms for different shows and stuff that you can get in. And so I knew I was going to get to interview the cast from Preacher. And I've loved that comic book forever. And then they made the show, and I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. And so I made a replica of the coffee can. And so, they let us all in the press rooms before the talent comes in. Like, so you sit there and wait, and then they like bring them all in, and they sit at the table up front, and then you ask them questions, and like, you raise your hand, like you would see it like, the White House press room or whatever.
Oh, okay.
But so like we went in, and I had it in my backpack. And so everybody like filters in, they let us all in and sit down, and I take it out, and I went and I put it up on the table next to his name card. And then I went and sat down. And then, so we're sitting there waiting, and people are all like, oh, what's that? What's that? And so the cast all walks in, and they're like walking by, and they're all like looking at it. That's weird. And then is Dominic Cooper sits down, and he like looks at it, and he like looks over, and like Seth Rogen was there, and he looks over at Seth Rogen. He's like, did you bring this? Because, they're like the creators of the show. So, and Seth's like, I don't know what it is. And so he's like looking at it, and I had put some of my business cards in it. So who would know who it was, right? So he opens, and he's looking at it, and then he's like looking around, and I'm like, hi. I was like, yeah, I made that for you. And he's like, this is for me, I can keep it? And I was like, yeah, like I made it for you. And then Joe Gilgun, who is Cassidy on the show, he's like, oh man, I want one of those. And he like starts going off, like, and he is exactly like his character in real life. And he's like, oh, I want one of those I would keep my weed in that if I had one of those. right? And so the following year, I went back to San Diego again, and they had another AMC preacher press room. And so I got into it again. And so I was like, okay, I'm going back. And he said he wanted one. So I'm going to make another one for him. So I brought it and I did the same thing. Like, they let us in the room. I pulled out my backpack and I set it down. And, we're sitting there waiting. And then the cast comes in and he walks in and he's like, where is he? Where is he? He's like looking around at the press and he sees me. He's like, you fucking did it, man. And I'm like, I told you I would bring you one. I was like, but you got to keep your weed in it. He's like, oh, I will.
Oh, awesome. That's great.
So I made 2 of them for 2 of the cast members.
So what made you just decide that, like, yes, you like to do the cosplay, but like really made you think, hey, I can make a business out of making stuff for people who are cosplaying?
Yeah, I mean, so the first thing that triggered it was really like I said, the Voltron stuff. And so I made the Bay art for myself and people were like, oh, can you make that for me? And I was like, well, and about the same time as when I first learned about Bill from the Punished Props and Harrison from Volpin Props, and because they had done some panels that I got to actually sit in and watch. And I remember the one panel of Volpins that I went to was all about molding and casting. And I was like, well, I can take this one that I made for myself that was just 3D printed, and I'm gonna try and mold and cast it, because then I can make them faster and easier. And so that was kind of my first big molding and casting thing. And I was like, oh, well, I'll go and I guess I'm gonna open an Etsy store and put stuff up there. And some people were just like, hey, what about, can you make this thing? And so I'd be like, well, yeah. And then people were making patterns and blueprints. I'm like, well, if I'm making something, I'm gonna make a template or a pattern for myself so I can put that up, and then I'll make the thing and I can put that up. And so one of the things that I really like doing is showing people how to do stuff and helping people do stuff. So it was kind of this way to make the things that I wanted to make, but then also help people make the things themselves. So whenever we make something to sell, I try, and I don't want to make this sound like a commercial, but one of the things I always try to do is I always try to do a template, if you want to make something out of foam or whatever yourself, files if you want to print something on a 3D printer, or in kits. We don't sell a lot of finished stuff.
Okay.
We almost never put up completely finished stuff. It's either paper templates, 3D models, or kits, so that whatever your comfort level is, right? You pick your starting point, but I want to see what you do with it, right?
Oh, cool.
So we always ask people please send us pictures when you're done, because we want to see what your interpretation from the starting point that we helped you with. Yeah, I just that's a huge part of it is I love seeing other people make stuff and helping people make stuff. And so yeah, so that was kind of why I started making stuff for people and making kits and things instead of finished stuff, because I just really want to see people be creative at whatever their comfort level is.
So one of the things that you created is the Prisoner of Azkaban holder thing with the
the
yeah.
I'm a prisoner mugshot.
Yeah. Was that 3D printed, or was that made? Was that a mold?
So that one is actually interesting because that was still kind of when I was first starting out, and there's this thing where you make something, you're I'm just gonna make that for myself. Nobody's gonna want to buy that thing. I'm not gonna go through the effort of the extra work to make it something that I can not mass produce, but repetitively make. And so I was it was stupid, because I was oh, nobody's gonna want an Azkaban sign. I'm just gonna make it for my costume. And so I actually made it out of foam. So the one that if you ever see me walking around, mine's made out of just EVA foam. I just made it.
Okay.
But I was saying, to make my foam one, I had made a pattern to use to cut out the foam. And so then people were like, oh, hey, that's cool. Can I have one? And I was like, I don't want to make a bunch of foam ones. But so I took, I had all the dimensions and the sizing and the letters that I had done for my foam one. And so I just took all that information and then I 3D modeled it and printed it, and then made a mold. I finished it all up and then I made a mold of it. So now anybody else that has one of ours is a resin cast one.
Oh, wow.
So it's actually, it's a little bit heavier than mine, but it's also thinner. So, cause mine's that was back when I was using floor mats for everything. So mine's this thick, because it's
wow.
The double layers.
Yeah.
And the resin ones though are this thick, and they're super durable though, cause they're resin. So they're a little easier to carry around and stuff.
Awesome. So one of the most recent things I noticed that you guys made, and you've shown this on your Instagram and a lot of other places, is the helmet of the,
The armorer?
the armorer? Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
say blacksmith, but it's not a blacksmith.
Yeah, like that was, everybody was calling her the blacksmith before like the show came out. So
Yeah.
like you'll see a lot of stuff that still says like the blacksmith, and then like because she doesn't actually ever have a name.
Right.
But like the armor is what it says in the credits, but nobody calls her either thing in the show ever. She never, like, nobody says
a name or anything.
a name or like addresses her directly by name. It's all just you walk in and talk to her, and or walk in and get your butt kicked if you're stormtroopers.
So what is that helmet made of? Is that resin or is it 3D printed? How's that one made?
Most of the stuff that we make, if we're doing like repetitive, like if we're making multiple copies, most of them start as 3D prints and then we mold and cast them. So this is actually a resin cast. This is the last resin cast of our helmet that we pulled actually before we retired the mold. But so it's resin. So it's not, you can see it's not super thick, but it's hard. So the actual helmets are all resin. But so what we did is we got a model from Sean Fields, because he had like the first model that came out before the show came out. And then right after we printed it and started to work on it, he like licenses his models if you want to do like molding and casting or whatever. So he released it, and then we started working on it, and then the show came out, and then we got some screenshots of the back of the helmet that hadn't been available. And so he had just guessed. And so the back of the helmet, like everything else was perfect, but the back of the helmet was completely wrong on the one that we had. And so what we ended up doing is on the 3D model, so like this part was wrong and like this back ridge was wrong. So we cut it completely out of the one that we had printed. And then I modeled just those pieces and 3D printed them, and then like fused it all together and finished it, and then finished it all up, and then mold and cast it. So that all the copies are resin helmets.
So what made you transition from being Billy the Brick and Heather as Felt Heart to being Sionnach? Like, what was the change that you guys made you decide this is what we want to do?
One of the things, one of my goals has always been to, most of our business as a business is doing stuff for like other cosplayers or whatever. But one of my goals has always been to kind of get to that next level of working with game companies, movie studios, TV studios, whatever, and doing like, bigger stuff that, gets on screen or whatever. And so we kind of decided that we needed like a more professional kind of, try to go to like a game company and be like, hey, I'm some random dude, I want to make stuff for you, versus like, we're a studio and we want to make stuff for you. And you can say we, even if there's only two of us, you can still say we, right? So, and so we kind of decided to do this to basically make it so we have the combined stuff. And so everything that we share is stuff that we've made together or one of us, but like, it's kind of like the more professional, like here's finished pieces and like the kind of the more professional front. And then, but we kept our own separate things. So like a lot of the work in progress and like, goofing off stuff goes on those. So those are like more personal, like us just being us. But then we have, we can send a company to this Instagram page or whatever, because it's just like all finished pieces and, it doesn't have like selfies of us being goofy or whatever. And we can keep those on there. And so we have that kind of separation for like the more professional stuff versus the more personal stuff.
Cool. Awesome. So when it comes, so getting back to just the cosplay stuff, what's one of the things that you've made for yourself that you've cosplayed that you think is your favorite thing that you've cosplayed?
I would say that my favorite thing that I've made for myself is probably Loki. Just because other than like, so the horns I didn't make, I finished them. They were a kit that I got from No One's Designs. And then my shoes, but other than that, like everything else in that costume, I also made from scratch. So the entire thing I patterned and made myself, and it's all faux leather. So like, it was one of those costumes that was really intense and really hard to make, especially it's like all sewing. There's like I have one little prop and that's it. And like, there's a couple little pieces on it that I 3D modeled, but everything else was sewing. So I think that's my favorite thing that I've made for myself as far as my costumes are concerned, just because of the amount of work that went into it. Like with Ashitaka, I made the whole thing from scratch, but I was like learning. So like I didn't realize some of the things that I did. I didn't realize that they were as hard as they were going in. So I was like, I could totally do this. With Loki, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be really hard and close to impossible. And then I did it. So it was like, there's part of it where I was like, I didn't know any better with Ashitaka, but then this, I was like, oh, that's going to be really hard to do. And so it felt like a bigger accomplishment getting it done because I knew it was going to be hard. Plus it's just fun to wear too.
Sure.
I mean, everybody loves Loki.
Very popular villain, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So would you also say then that maybe it's also your most challenging one, or would you say there's one that's more challenging than Loki?
No, as far as like the whole thing, that was probably my most challenging thing that I've made and finished, I guess I should say. There's plenty of things that I haven't finished yet that when they're all said and done might be. Like Starscream, that's gonna probably be
Starscream. That's gonna be fully wearable, walkable. Hopefully.
Yeah, that's my goal is to, and it's like G1 Starscream. I have, I actually have it. You can't see it, it's up over here, but like the helmet is up over there, and it's all made out of foam. And then over on the stand over there is the chest. You saw it earlier a little bit briefly, but yeah, the whole chest piece is done. And then I have. So one of the things that was really challenging, the foam, I mean, it's a big foam build, so it's challenging in that regard. But the most challenging part so far with that, though, is I actually made my first silicone mask that I made that's wearable. It's down here somewhere, but like it's too far away to grab. Otherwise, I would grab it out. But yeah, it's a silicone mask it looks all metallic and everything. And, it looks like G1 Starscream. But I made it to my face because I have a head cast. So like it fits on my face perfectly. And the mouth, like I can move the mouth when I move my mouth.
Wow. Yeah. That's exciting. I hope to one day see that. Fingers crossed.
Yes.
Get it done.
Yes. That, I've been told it has to be done by CybCon next year.
What con?
CybCon?
Oh,
CYB?
Oh yes.
Cybertron?
I thought
which is, or CybCon Northwest, I think is what the full name, but
cool.
Yeah. So
I know I've been wanting to go to that con, but every time something occurs and I never get to it. And of course this year,
exactly
kept me from going.
Yeah. They're like, you better have that Starscream done by next year. You don't have any excuses. You have a whole year to get it done before the next one.
No pressure, right?
Right. Yeah. Everything else in the world is fine. So
nice. So what's one thing or what's something that's helped to keep you motivated to do what you're doing? Not just the stuff for your studio, but for your own personal like cosplay. Like what's something that you're like, I don't want to do it, but you know what? I'm going to do this. Like what keeps you motivated to want to cosplay?
So it's a great question because I actually am having, honestly a really hard time with it. Like it's all I can do to work on the stuff that I like. It's hard enough to work on like with pandemic and fires and remote learning for kids. Like it's hard enough just to like get any work time in. And so, we have a business. So my first goal is always like the customer stuff has to get done first. If there's time left, then I'll work on my stuff. And like, so it's hard. And like, but to answer the question realistically, so this is actually something that hopefully, I mean, if there's an Emerald City Comic-Con, that they'll hopefully be done for that and we'll wear them. But so the one thing, because my thing is like, well, I'm going to work on everybody else's stuff first and not my own. Heather and I decided that for our next costumes that we're making each other's costumes.
Oh,
and so
wow.
I don't like that way. I can't be, because it's not my costume. So I'll work on it. Right. And so I'm making hers and she's making mine because she'll get it done. Like she doesn't have problems like I do with is often with getting stuff done. So like I know she'll get mine done. And because I'm not making my own, like I'll get it done for her. And then but of course the driver there is that then we get to wear those costumes together. So yeah, making stuff for myself, unless it's like a little thing, like I don't have an answer because I am struggling to keep myself motivated.
So what's some advice you'd want to give to someone who is interested in starting cosplay? What's something you didn't know that you think would be good for someone to know who wanted to start?
I think, so usually like I have one answer that I always give, but I have a second answer that I'm going to I'm gonna give you both because the second one is a new one. But the one that I like to always tell people is that um, there's no right or wrong way to do something, and you know, closet cosplay, buying a costume, making everything from scratch yourself, they're all completely valid. And if you want to make something, failure is okay. Not only is it okay, but it's good for you. I know a lot of people struggle with like, oh, I can't do that, or like, oh, I'm not, I don't want to try that because I might screw it up. And it's like, do it and screw up.
Yeah.
Right. Like, that's how, like, I cannot tell you, like, I have a giant bucket over there of like failed molds and casting. Like, it doesn't matter how long you do stuff. Like, you learn, like, you'll do something and be like, oh, yeah, that was dumb, but I'm not going to do it again because now I learned that, right? And
Yeah.
it's especially with the amount of materials and ways to make things, you're going to make mistakes and experiment, and that's totally cool. You'll get pleasantly surprised sometimes. But the second thing, which is the newer answer that I would give, is social media. Like, don't care about numbers and what other people are doing, and just don't compare yourself to people. Taking social media breaks is like something I've started doing the past couple of weeks. Like, seriously, like on my phone, you know, you can do the screen time thing and it shows you like how often you've been using things. Like, my Facebook and Twitter and Instagram were like way too many hours. And like last week, my average daily usage was like 20 minutes. So I went from like hours and hours to like, and I'm like, wow, you know, I feel a lot better. Not just, and like just about everything, right? Because there's so many times that we see stuff online and we're like, oh, I wish I could do that, or I wish I was doing that. It's like, well, yeah, but that's one picture, and like the rest of the 99% of the time, they probably feel exactly like you do. But like, and it's this mental thing that even if you know that, like just seeing it like constantly in your face, like defeats that thing in your brain that like, you know, that's not how it is for everybody, but like it just goes right through that if you're seeing it like in your face constantly.
Totally.
So take a break.
Cool. Well, what is in this time frame we're living in now? A lot of things are going on. It's really difficult for a lot of people in different ways for different reasons. And one of the things I like to ask everyone in this interview is, what's one charity or organization that you think is doing good in the world that you would like to highlight or let people know about to help?
Yeah. So, you know, we mentioned the Azkaban sign and Sirius, and that's one of my other favorite cosplays, or at least it has been historically. And especially right now with just all the stuff with JK and oh gosh, all the transphobia stuff. The one I'd like to shout out is the Transgender Law Center. I think they're doing a lot of great work with just trying to protect some basic human rights for some people, which I think is kind of important. You know.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. So with that, I'll put a link to their organization in the description below for everyone to see. But when it comes to knowing more about you and what you guys are doing, so where can they find Sionnach Studios or you on social media or online?
So we have our own website, but we have a YouTube channel. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Twitch, although we're on hiatus from Twitch right now. But yeah, it's just Sionnach Studios everywhere.
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So I'll just put a link down to your website because you can probably find everything from there on there. Excellent. Cool. All right. Well, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it. I hope everything is going well in your guys' life, and I can't wait to see all the fun things you guys create, especially that star screen.
Oh my gosh, I cannot wait to go to a convention again and see people.
Me too. Me too. All right. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Joel.
And if you want to know more about what I'm doing, right here at the end of the video, you'll see a playlist of the other cosplay videos I've done and the next or another video that's come up recently. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all real soon.